Samantha, Thea, and other members of the CCC committee, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, friends. First, let me thank the CCC for inviting me this evening. It's a privilege and a pleasure to be here with you. I think the Best Corporate Citizen Sustainability Awards, having listened to what Dr. Uchitha D'Souza has just said in his vivid and passionate presentation, clearly the importance of these awards have been highlighted and underlined by the key messages that he delivered in his excellent presentation, which was full of a lot of insightful information and analysis. So let me commend the CCC for holding this annual event to encourage corporates to focus on the triple bottom line concept. And it's also encouraging that the message is going to be taken to a wider audience to include more SMEs in future years. Now, listening to Uchitha, there are clearly very compelling reasons why sustainability has to be at the very top of the agenda of governments, of businesses, of civil society. The case for doing this, for attaching the highest priority to sustainability, is brought home to us almost on a daily basis as we see around the world an increasing frequency and intensity in extreme weather events. So clearly, this is a whole area that requires the attention, as I said, of all segments of our societies. Now, of course, if you invite the central bank governor, you're going to get a dose of growth and stability. So I'm going to say a little bit about growth and stability, and then try to weave in the sustainability theme into those two concepts. First, about stability. I think all of you will agree that as a country, if you look at our post-independence era, we have underperformed. We started by being second to Japan on almost any indicator, second to Japan in Asia on almost any indicator, and clearly now we've fallen behind a number of other Asian countries. And part of the reason is, I think, we've had this rather toxic combination of populist politics and a rather deeply entrenched entitlement culture amongst all of us. And each of those has fed off the other, and we've had a non-virtuous, one virtuous cycle downwards. So we need to break out of that. And one thing, and certainly from a central bank's perspective, one thing that is crucial is to have stability in the economy. And to achieve stability, we need to break the mold in terms of our fiscal performance. The main source of instability in the system for decades has been the government budget. The government budget has pumped excess demand into the system. And we've had what could be characterized as a high budget deficit, high inflation, high nominal interest rate, and overvalued exchange rate economy, which is diametrically the opposite of how you would characterize the successful economies of East and Southeast Asia. So the first thing we need to do is to fix our fiscal problem. And there, I think there are encouraging signs. The government seems to be committed to addressing the structural problem that we have on the fiscal front. It's interesting that since 1987, in every single year, recurrent expenditure has exceeded revenue. I mean, think of your businesses. If this happened, if you had this, year after year after year. We got away with it because we were a donor darling and we got very generous amounts of foreign aid, which enabled us to live beyond our means. We're no longer a low-income country. We're no longer eligible, or at least are eligible, for highly concessional foreign aid is being gradually eliminated. Now we have to go to international capital markets and borrow at high interest rates. So it's a whole new paradigm and we need to internalize that, and that places an even higher premium on managing our fiscal affairs well. And as I said, the government seems to have made a good start, but it's only a start. We need to persevere. And I must say that the lives of central bankers is made a lot easier if the government gets a good fiscal outcome, because then it's a lot easier to deliver low and stable nominal interest rates and a competitive and stable exchange rate. Because as long as the budget is pumping excess demand into the system, it is not possible to deliver low and stable interest rates or a competitive and stable exchange rate. We artificially suppress the natural market forces time and again we spend billions of dollars of our reserves to pointlessly defend the rupee, and then in the end depreciate by 10 and 15%, having lost a couple of billion or $3 billion of our reserves. We constantly keep interest rates artificially low, and then suddenly they have to go up 500, 600 basis points. So we're trying to get away from all that. We're trying to set policy within a new mold, to be more proactive and forward-looking in our monetary policy, to maybe adjust our interest rates early enough, as soon as we see overheating in the economy, and to try to broadly keep the exchange rate competitive. That's a politically tough thing because of the high import component in our basic consumption bundle. But we want to move towards that. So that's one thing that the central bank is intent upon doing, is to move towards this more forward-looking policy, both in terms of interest rates and the exchange rate, to be more proactive than perhaps we have been in the past. So that's the stability side of things. What about growth? Clearly, people say, why are you economists, why do you tend to be preoccupied with growth, at least some of them? And here, of course, it's very important to emphasize that the quality of growth is very important. But before I get on to that, let me say there are those who tell me, for instance, in Sri Lanka we have our own way of doing things. We don't have to be bothered about growth. We have got excellent social indicators. We are outperformers on the Millennium Development Goals. We punch way above our weight in terms of the Human Development Index of the UNDP. In fact, if you look at the gap between the ranking on the Human Development Index and the ranking in terms of per capita income, Sri Lanka is that gap is second biggest for Sri Lanka. So we are well above in terms of the Human Development Index when you compare it to our per capita income. And so people say, okay, we get these very good outcomes in terms of our social development. Why do we need to get exercised by growth? And there I posed the question to people saying, well, yes, we've done that, but we've also had two youth insurrections in the south and a separatist conflict in the north. And for me, now there's complex causality behind each of these events. I don't want to oversimplify, but I think it's fair to say, arguably the most important causal factor was the mismatch between opportunities and expectations for our young people. So social development alone is not enough. We need to grow the pie, to increase the size of the cake as well. And that's where we have not been as good as we should have been. And even today, really, we don't have a sustainable growth model. A growth model that will give us 7, maybe 8% growth over 10, 15, even 20 years, as countries in East and Southeast Asia have achieved. But I don't need to tell you this, you have heard it again and again. The growth model we have to get to is It's a private sector-led growth model, and this is not an ideological thing for me anyway. I've been a public servant all my life, so I don't think that, the private sector is a panacea to everything. You can get very good development outcomes with different models. You take China and Vietnam at one end and much more market-oriented economies. So you can get good outcomes with different models, but the state in Sri Lanka just does not have the money to drive development. We've basically maxed out on our credit card, and therefore it has to be private capital, domestic and foreign, which has to drive the growth process in this country. We have no choice. It's not ideological. So it's got to be private sector driven, and it's got to be export. With a market of 21 billion people, you're not going to get 7-8% growth over 10-15 years on a sustained basis unless you're competitive and your growth process is driven to a significant extent by meeting external demand, by exports. And as far as I know, no country has made this transformation in terms of export performance without foreign direct investment playing a significant role. In terms of filling the savings investment gap, in terms of bringing in technology, know-how, in terms of bringing access to markets. So that's really the model that we need to get at. It's nothing new. We've been talking about it for many years, but we haven't been able to put it into place. Private sector led with exports and FDI as key pillars. So if that is the growth model, how do we kind of bring it in, or how do I make it relevant to the theme of sustainability, which is what we are here today to celebrate, or achievements in terms of sustainability. There, I think, as I said, it's not just growth, but the quality of growth that matters. And there are a number of cross-cutting themes that I would like to share with you. Uchita has really given you the sustainability angle. I mean, I think comprehensively and with great clarity and passion. So I think I'd like to broaden out the concept of sustainability, go beyond environmental concern, and to look at some other dimensions as well. And one is clearly inclusivity. If we are to have sustained growth, socially stable, politically stable growth, we have a very aspirational society now. So this growth process has to be inclusive. And the mechanism for sharing the benefits of growth is clearly employment. So you've got to create higher value jobs as you go along to meet the aspirations of this rising middle class that we have in this country today. And the way that the broad mass of our society can share in the benefits of growth is by empowering them with education, training and skills development. That is the key. So employment is the mechanism for sharing the benefits of growth. You empower people to be able to participate in a modernizing, growing economy through the education, training and skills development process. And promoting SMEs and improving agricultural productivity also has to be a part of that narrative in our country. Now there's often a debate, in my view, a false dichotomy between growth and inclusivity. There are those who say, to go for growth, others who say you have to have inclusivity. In my way of thinking, they can be complementary in many ways. The most significant, arguably, is the fact that when you have growth, you get more tax revenue. Your fiscal envelope increases to deliver basic services like health and education. And also, higher growth and higher taxes enable you to have social safety nets. For instance, in India, the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Agency would not have been possible but for the acceleration in growth. The Bolsa Familia program in Brazil, which is also celebrated as providing an excellent social safety net, would not have been possible without acceleration of growth in Brazil. Brazil is going through hard times now, but they had a phase under President Lula when they went in the way to accelerate growth. That gave them the revenue to put in place the Bolsa Familia program, which gave social protection to a large number of people. So growth and inclusivity can be mutually reinforcing. And it's important that while we go for growth, while we are providing education, training, and skills development for the people, and giving basic services to provide a social development threshold which is desirable, we also have to have a social safety net for the poor and vulnerable. But the important thing is to design it. It has to be well designed, it has to be well targeted. And there, we have always struggled to do that, because often these programs tend to get politicized and they become part of political patronage rather than being designed to provide a safety net. And another, I said there are a series of cross-cutting themes associated with good quality growth. And the other theme, of course, is gender balance. And here, in a way, we don't have an option, because with the aging of the population, we can't afford to have 35% of our female population participating in the labor force. The demands of a modernizing economy are going to be such that there's going to have to be some augmentation of labor, and bringing more women into the labor force is going to have to be part of the narrative. And the other thing, of course, is regional development. Clearly, one wants to have balanced regional development. And that gives me a chance quickly to put in a bit of a plug for the government's development program. You would have heard the Prime Minister's statement, his 1,500-day plan for development of the country, and he talked about these 2 economic corridors. And the high points of those economic corridors are the Western Region Megapolis Plan. I think all of you know, I don't know to go into details. The port city or the International Financial Center in the Western Province. And then you're going to have Hambantota in the south. The Chinese have plans to create a city of 300 to 400,000 people, 2,000, 2,500 companies to come into their free trade, to the special economic zone of about 1,500 acres. The port and airport are going to be given out on long lease. So there's a tremendous development around Hambantota, which will benefit the areas of Monaragala, Uvo, etc., which are currently lagging regions. Equally, there are plans to develop Trincomalee. The Singaporeans, their consultancy Subarna Jurong, which produced the master plan for the Western Region Megapolis, is also doing that plan for the Trincomalee area. And the idea is for the Singaporeans, the Indians, and the Japanese to come together to develop the Trincomalee area. And that area development will benefit, the benefits will flow through into the Rajarata and also to the north and down further south to the east as well. In addition, there is a master plan for Kandy being developed by Japan, and Kurunagala, Kuliapatiya are going to be industrial clusters as well. So there is all this development plan. But again, I should say, to make it inclusive, while one is focusing on these, creating these focal points of development, it's important that we are spatially neutral in terms of delivering basic services. i.e., everybody in the country needs to get a decent education, decent health services, decent water and sanitation. But then, once they're empowered through education, they can participate in the modernizing, the urbanizing kind of process that these major development programs will deliver. So let me finish by saying, okay, what about sustainability. Clearly, I think for the private sector and for the government, it's important that the budgeting processes, the planning processes have sustainability mainstreamed into it. And Yuchita's presentation clearly gave us very detailed and insightful ways of how that process can be carried through. As for the private sector, the triple bottom line approach that you're celebrating today clearly is crucial going forward. And so let me, before I finish, congratulate all the award winners. It is clearly those companies and companies like them who will be taking the lead in ensuring that we have a sustainable and prosperous future for ourselves, for our children and our grandchildren. Thank you all very much.